Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo, and welcome to Monday Live, something that we do here every Monday afternoon at 3. So by now, you know that the panelists are on mondaylive.org, listed there. And the most important part here is to point out that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And please do engage with us on the chat and Q&A. And just a reminder, this slide deck is on mondaylive.org if you need any of the links that we have on it. So this month, we're talking about the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, C4SB. I put up the link to the website just in case people wanted to go there. And this is the agenda. We'll have a chit chat about news and trends, and then we'll talk mostly about workforce development related topics. And we're going to have a guest, Melissa Boutfeld, that will join us. And then we'll have a good chit chat about it. So before that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken Sinclair first. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Anto, sorry about that. And that's another $5 I've got to
$5.
there. $5 every time you misuse it. Great. Okay, we've got our September issue online, Smarter Sustainability, Decarbonization, and Electrification. Getting good reaction out of that. We're working on our October issue, and the theme is Collaboration, Integration, Education. I think this is something that's become obvious in the last month, is that we all need to better understand the complex mosaic of our collective collaborative teams. We're required to work with the strangest of bedfellows, and it's in addition to the being bedfellows, there's bed devices and apps and databases and the grid and almost everything we need to interact with and collaborate with. So collaboration and understanding what it is we need to collaborate with is becoming our new mandate. So I'm going to explore that a bit. Should have some fun with that topic. One of the articles that caught my eye is a white paper on AI benefits in the current energy transformation. And I like the last line. It says, the effort to decarbonize our energy systems are leading to an increased integrate and electrified energy systems with much more interaction between the power. That's an interesting thing, because that's all going to mean more control, more collaboration, more integration, and more education. So I think that's an interesting paper to take a look at. In addition to that, something that caught my eye was a discussion between Brian Turner and Nicholas, our contributing editor, and Nicholas has his own blogs, and they're on that. Leaving No Engineer Behind, Healthy Ontology Wars. I think that's just a really good stuff that Brian and Nicholas start talking about there. So take a quick look at that. That's a link to the YouTube there. And we're hard at preparing our AHR Expo 2020 Vegas 12. We're up to 12 education sessions now. Our theme is navigating the adoption of smarter, sustainable BAS. So a lot of room to wiggle in there and a lot of topics to talk about. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you. Thank you. And so over to Mark. You're muted. Muted mic. Mark.
I've got two for us today. So just out a couple hours ago that the Biden administration is lifting travel ban for fully vaccinated international travelers. So to me, in thinking, does this now open up international folks coming to AHR? Whereas I think amongst the discussion of everybody is who's going to be at AHR this year. So the fact that they have opened it up, I think, this bodes well, and hopefully we might see a few more international folks than maybe what we had once thought if this remains. So I think this is a good thing. So on to the next one. All right, so we talk a lot about standards. We talk a lot about interoperability. We talk about integration and things like that. So this caught my attention. And while it's not new, the fact that it's starting to gain a lot of traction in the smart home market, this whole idea of no matter who the manufacturer is, whether it's a thermostat manufacturer or 7 of them, lighting systems, kitchen appliances, or whatever, all now you standardizing, coming together on this thing called Matter, which, if they're the first doing this, are we that far behind? I don't know. So anyway, those are the 2 things that really caught my attention last week and this week.
That Matter is getting a lot of attention, Mark, recently in the smart home space. There have been some other previous initiatives. MQTT is still one of the big favorite ones out there in that particular market space, but the Matter thing has become a huge deal. There've been previous attempts at, siloed solutions, point solutions, unique solutions, but Matter's the first sort of big focus on the open standard.
Is Matter a protocol? What is Matter?
It's a data level, information level protocol. It's actually not new. It is actually it came out of Zigbee.
I was just going to say that.
It's the Zigbee Energy Profile or some other name. That's what it was called. It was started actually about 10 years ago. It's something that sits over, not at the transport level, all the way up to the application level.
But I think the traction this time around is obviously you can see some of the big names in it. And Samsung's in it, LG, the big appliance manufacturers or whatever. So I think the difference this time around is the folks that have publicly stepped up and are endorsing this and supporting this.
Yeah.
And this is out of the CSA, and the CSA really is that rebirth of Zigbee, but they've combined several of the protocol groups and stacks together to form this alliance, and their membership is impressive for sure.
Yeah.
So that just leaves the question: does Matter actually matter? Anyway.
Don't quit your day job, Anton. Please.
I think there's a bigger question. Does this mean I have to throw away everything I bought over the last 3 years so that it'll work with the new standard? Or do I need a Jace to connect all the shit in my house? Anyway.
Back to the international travel. One other piece of that, Mark, is travel insurance for folks out of the US is becoming quite problematic. I was talking to somebody from India, and that's what's preventing them from traveling is for them to carry medical insurance to go into the US. Your hospitals are notorious for not being cheap, and so the whole fact of, in fact, you did contact COVID while you were in the US, it's kind of a pretty big hit for the insurance companies. So we're starting to see a bit of a ripple effect there.
A lot of it's excluded too.
Yeah. Hey, I got 3 topics here. First, on the right, the SEC, I've been talking about this theme emerging over the last number of months, and now the SEC is investigating companies on their overblown ESG labeling and the whole greenwashing thing. I'm seeing more and more talk about it, and now this was on Bloomberg. You have to have a password, an account to get in, but the fact that the SEC is now looking at these organizations. So it went from, there was a need to put your ESG story in your annual report, and now it's part of your annual report. So the SEC is looking at it. And I mean, there seem to be a fairly sizable numbers of stories about greenwashing exaggeration. Anyways, watch that. I thought this other one at the top left was interesting. High energy use buildings are going to depreciate more because of the effort to, have better buildings, right? So there's going to be a clearer differentiation, kind of like, when the price of gas goes high, people look a lot more closely at the mileage of the vehicle they're going to buy. I thought that was kind of interesting. And the other one is a quote from Canary Media about, the other side of our energy future, our energy grid and reliability and the human impact of that. They have a story about the more people died from the lack of power after the hurricane in New Orleans than did from the hurricane. And that's a pretty sobering story. It shows our dependence as human beings and need on the grid to live in these climates that, really are only able to support large populations with technology, right? With the grid, with water, et cetera. And more people died from the heat afterwards with no air conditioning. Anyways, those are my stories.
Great, thank you. Oops. I had a couple of things. One, we've talked in the past about repurposing buildings, and there's a thing, I don't know what to call it. It's a performance thing going around the country right now around the Van Gogh paintings. Basically, what they do is they take over a big space and they project Van Gogh and played nice music for about an hour, which is actually wonderful. I went to the one in Charlotte last week, and the interesting thing is that it's being held, many of them are being held in like former, in this case in one place in DC is former Save-A-Lot. So they're repurposing grocery stores, basically empty grocery stores, with art, right? And the point of actually putting it out here is that it's kind of an interesting arty thing, but is that another sort of way of repurposing buildings that we no longer use? So I thought that's interesting. And if you get a chance to go to one of these, you should. It's worth spending an hour. And the other one on the right is a survey that was funded by Honeywell of education-related facility managers. And 2/3 of them are more concerned about smart buildings now than they were before the pandemic, which is a pretty big number. And so it's worth a look at that, because there's something definitely moving there.
Yeah, not surprising. Did any of you listen to Realcomm session on Friday?
No.
With they had Google and Microsoft were two of the and Oxford Properties. They're talking about smart buildings. I did, so just letting you know that among the three of them, they all feel very strongly that that smart buildings are essential to their operations, to keeping their employees happy, and they're definitely investing. But also, it's interesting, as big as they are, they were, I guess, humble enough to recognize that they're not big enough to drive the market, but they want to at least be perceived as leaders in this area.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Any other out of band news or comments before?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of things. One was I noted that due to the China, unfortunately I didn't get time to post it today, but due to the Chinese regulatory crackdown, right now the investors and funds are going crazy. It's hit record numbers everywhere around the world, but it's dropped off a cliff on investments in China because China's regulatory crackdown on its tech sector. It's kind of e-commerce, gaming, education, and everybody's moved their money back to US holdings. So it's quite an interesting time. Bearing in mind, as I say, it's a record time for investments for everything globally.
To that note, Roger, someone is telling me there's something over there called Evergreen or something, very connected to the real estate holdings.
There's a bubble
or whatever
going on now, Mark.
Yeah,
the bubbles are ready to pop.
Yeah, it's dropping, and it's dropping like flies.
Yeah.
No, I think there's obviously they're over egging the market. There's no question about that. Something's going to have to happen soon. But the other weird thing that's happened is that here is that in the UK particularly is that we opened our energy supplies to the private sector some time ago, and all the smaller companies are actually going bust because as energy prices have been going up, they've been offering fixed price deals.
Wow.
And so they're stuck, and a number of them already gone bust. And the tracking body called Ofgem is actually calling their financials for all of them because it's causing a problem. They can't all be supported by, they think they'll end up with just 4 or 5 big ones again in a minute. But the other side issue with that that's really bizarre is there's going to be a shortage of meat in the supermarkets or the grocery stores because a byproduct of what they do is produce fertilizer, but also CO2. And the CO2 is used to actually stun them before they are actually slaughtered. So they're actually saying within 2 or 3 weeks' time, there will be a shortage of meat in the grocery stores completely. So we might be going without our Christmas dinner this year.
Okay, anything else? Move on. Okay, so let us move on. So our topic is C4SB, and this week we're going to talk about workforce. So I'm going to bring on Melissa Boutwell. Hello, Melissa. I'm going to bring you on as a panelist. Some of you may know Melissa. She spoke at the Orlando last AHR in Orlando. I met her there. And she is very passionate about development of education, especially for this industry. And she is very much involved in the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. So Melissa, welcome. You are still muted. You can unmute and put your camera on. Hello.
Hey guys, it's good to see you. I'm hailing from Nashville today. I'm on the roads and it's great to see all of you again. Thank you for having an opportunity to come in and talk to you about workforce.
So I'm going to hand it over to you. Maybe if you can make a brief introduction as to your background and why you're so passionate about workforce development, and then lead us on this conversation about workforce as part of C4SB.
Yeah, so just a brief background on me personally. I've been in this industry in one end of it for about a little more than 30 years. And I started out in advanced manufacturing, and then when I got finished helping factories move overseas, I decided to go into the utility industry and the SCADA side of things because no one was moving wastewater and power lines to Malaysia. And I spent time as a systems integrator in that world for about 15 years. And then decided to go back to work for the building owner and had, a large responsibility as the director of utilities and optimization strategy for a large organization. And it was in that role that the convergence of our workforce development issues was so apparent to me, because not only did we have challenges as the property owner, but all of our contractors, all of our integration partners, everyone was having that challenge. And so I took a new chapter and started working about 4 years ago to do something about it. I've taken on the role as an actual professor in a lab-based program. And today we are affiliated, our company is affiliated with the University of Central Florida for the purpose of building capacity for workforce for large organizations throughout the United States. And we do have international partners as well. So that's a brief overview of my background. Today, I thought it might be useful just to talk a little bit about some of the roles in our industry and to kind of get the panel to contribute to some thoughts on changes that are happening in this world. Right now, if you look at workforce development issues and you consider them from an economic development point of view, economic development models all want to know what are the high wage jobs that are going to increase at a high percentage year over year, meaning that there are more of these jobs being added, and that rate of adding new jobs is going to continue into a given period of time. When we look at that from a workforce development issue in our industry, right now, the red layer is the area that we as an industry are the most focused on, because that is our entry-level technician. That's where the most bleeding is happening in the field. We have persistent vacancies that are staying open, and there is a need throughout the industry, regardless of what end of the workforce you're in, whether you're the property owner, whether you're a systems integrator. This is really the biggest need, but there's also an emphasis to make sure that there are roles and occupations being developed up that food chain as well. So for today, I thought what could be interesting, Anto, if you're agreeable, is for us to put some questions out for the group. Let me show a couple of slides. Many of you have already seen this through C4SB, but then let's have some interactive discussion and hear from some of the other people in the audience of thoughts about some of the changes that are impacting these roles in the industry. Is that okay with y'all?
Sounds good. Could you put it in presentation mode? Just click on that.
Is it not?
No, it's not. Click on the top right, presentation mode. Present.
It says you are sharing.
Yeah, you're sharing all right, but where it says present.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
No, the other one. The button next to it says present. There you go. Just click that.
It was behind all of your great pictures.
There you go.
So anyway, so first of all, do the panelists agree that the largest need right now is that entry-level field technician, regardless of what we call them? Is there agreement on the panel that this is probably the biggest pain point that we're experiencing in the industry?
Could you just describe this pyramid and the stack and the numbers and the?
Yep. So if you look at these roles, these are what we call field level roles. And these are people that are doing the physical work in the field for the building owner or for the systems integration contractor. And they're not remote jobs. They actually have to be at the property to do something. And the gray roles are going to typically be your low voltage electrical installers. The dark gray, the controls first responders, are often going to be mechanical contractors that have mechanical teams and they, service controls in some way. But the red box and the green box are really the first two roles that are considered to be systems integrator roles. And that automation specialist is the entry point into the industry, where they're carrying a laptop, they're helping with, point verification and commissioning and doing the most entry-level work in the field. The system specialist is when they take on greater responsibility for functional performance testing, and when they also start servicing existing buildings and addressing issues and concerns that may come up from analytics or, alarms and things like that, where there is an existing property that has a system that needs service. When you get up the stack, these are considered remote roles that are in our industry. And these are the user experience related roles, where there might be a dedicated graphics team, or there might be a dedicated team that is focused on pulling all the different software solutions together so that that end user has one pane of glass. The integration specialist is what we consider the primary engineering or design role. We have titled it integration specialist because there are many states where you cannot use the term engineer for these roles because of the PE requirements in those states. And then you have your typical project specialist, that's your project manager, and a client experience specialist that is supposed to be not just sales, but the business development arm that is the solutions side of the business, helping the building owner make sure that they're at least connecting the use cases for what their goals are to the right solutions with technology. So if we look at that from the point of view of this pyramid, the pyramid is intended to suggest volume of jobs. It's obviously not perfect, but there are fewer of the higher level jobs and there are a greater number of the lower level entry level jobs. And for our purposes today, we're not really looking at those low voltage electrical install jobs. We're really focused on that entry level systems integrator job. So with that in mind, is there agreement that the biggest pain point is that red layer where it's the field level, entry level systems integration technician?
Yes.
I think, yeah, from my perspective, Melissa, I think, you know, the way that this industry has typically got people move to the high levels is, you know, the domain knowledge is such specific and, you know, such unique amount of characteristics and the breadth of it, right? You know, from mechanical systems to networking systems to control systems. And I think we talked about this a few weeks back, you know, and how that was done in the past, of course, was that the large controls companies, the Honeywells and Johnsons, used to be the training ground for those guys, right? They used to have great, I went through that program and still have the Honeywell Grey Book. But those programs have disappeared and was never really replaced, right? And it's not, there's some training that you can do, but until you actually get your hands on it in the field, you know, do you have the ability to sort of move up the ladder in some context? So that's where I see it, definitely.
I think I know as well what happened was with the bigger, you know, the bigger four type companies training everybody. It was then the system integrators just started stealing the trained guys. As soon as they were trained up, they were trying to actually pull them off. So, which is why really the bigger companies gave up the training courses. And I think also the other observation for me is that younger guys, of course, tend to be attracted more to the top of the pile where it's software or applications and things rather than the bit at the bottom, which is the practical, you know, HVAC automation bit. And that's somehow where we got to get the guys going.
Well, and you bring up a really important point, Roger, that we do have access points where someone can enter those roles in an entry level basis to be the support of a more senior person on that team. But there still has to be some opportunity to understand the practical field level side. But in terms of pain across the industry, that field level technician gap is the biggest pain point that we know is occurring. And there are reasons for that. Some of it is raw demographics. There are, I can't even remember the exact number, but I've got a lot of demographic data that shows that, you know, there are so many million fewer babies that are entering, you know, the workforce at a given time. So when you have fewer people to choose from in the first place, then that's a challenge. But in addition to that, there are other competing forces because every industry is experiencing this at the entry level. Then everybody's competing for the same people. And so we have to put the sexy on it. We have to make this something that is attractive to people that have no affiliation and never knew anyone in this space. We, you know, in my home, my husband is a controls engineer. We raised 4 kids and they are all very technical people. They're very familiar with this industry, but that we have to recruit from people that have no prior experience and no prior knowledge. So with that in mind, I'm really interested in posing a couple of questions for you guys today. one of the challenges and opportunities with some of the excellent projects that we have in place, we're working with the Department of Labor, working with the Department of Education. We have gotten some fabulous traction with some major companies to, come together to attract this issue. But one of the pressing questions that is asked often in these workforce development discussions is, what is the impact that emerging technology will have on these roles over the next 10 years? And the educational system is a slow moving actuator. It has a lot of horsepower, but it is very slow to move. And the concern that I and others in our conversations have is that we have to be very careful as an industry as we activate a lot of these powerful forces on our behalf, that we don't have the parameters of what we're asking for are tuned to what this actuator can do. And so we want to make sure that we're being very sensitive to the impact that emerging technologies will have on these roles and the type of education that we're making sure is available for people entering the workforce. So I want to pose this question and get a little bit of conversation going on where you see these impacts being the most pronounced on these.
Sorry, I'm sorry to speak up again, but so that actually talks to, one of the other perspectives of the previous slide with not being able to get the technicians. One of the things we're starting to hear a lot from the end users is that they're looking to, well, let me put it the other way. I'm getting a lot of feedback from end users going, look, we're looking to AI and machine learning technologies to solve the problem of the fact that I can't get young people in the space, which is really weird, right? I mean, it's sort of upside down. So they've started to recognize that, they can't get the young folk in. So maybe machines and AI technology can replace them, and then I get crazy requests like, well, will your software be able to automatically go in and fix a damper motor? Well, no, I still need someone to go and change the motor or whatever else. But my point about all that is I have a bit of a fear is itself in reinforcing that, people start saying that, oh yeah, I can bring technology in that can automatically fix all your PID loops and all your VAV controllers, with magical AI machine learning technology, and therefore you don't need the young engineers to do the work type of thing. So, but then that goes back to, well, then who's going to train those machines and who's going to build those machines?
But I would argue, though, Anna, we're probably our own worst enemy, because the way I write my program for my PID loop is better than yours. Yours is better than Steve's, and Steve's is better than Melissa. So we've been our own enemy because we've always, So I think really one of the important things I think should, will be emerging standards, if you like Haystack and other things that are really that can be adopted at a higher level to actually ease that complex part, which is the engineering and commissioning, which is the variable, because the panels, the wiring, the sensors, and also the direct connectivity of a lot more things to the cloud will actually mean that whilst they've got to actually have the electrical part where it's connected, you would hope that connectivity is just going to be like it is in the home, should be a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, Melissa, I think whether it's AI or data integration or anything having to do with the software side of taking advantage of this data and doing something with it is definitely going to influence the upcoming generation, because they're growing up with computers and tablets and smartphones, and they just want to continue in that kind of world. That goes in opposition to the reality of the industry we're in, which is that if you don't understand what's going on physically in the building, you have no appreciation for the mechanical and electrical systems that all these controllers are associated with. I happen to have been looking at a bunch of products that a distributor resells, and just familiarize myself with a lot of names I've known over the years. it's just astonishing the amount of product that is out there, and all of the specific IO devices that are there to convert from protocols, or to do all the types of signal conditioning. Again, if you don't have an appreciation for this, all the great software in the world isn't going to make the building operate the way it needs to. It's certainly not. People aren't going to be able to respond when something fails, because they're not even going to understand what failed.
Right.
So fundamentally, yes, we've got to find a way to get the technicians. Maybe that's through community college type programs, tech schools, places like that. They're more hands-on oriented, because you've got to have a layer of people who actually know what it's like to walk a building, to go into a control room and know what they're looking at.
And to find the control room. I
Right,
mean,
right.
that's no easy task.
Yes, because those individuals are the translators for the folks higher up who are doing the software, and that's the generation that's actually going to do a lot of the engineering. That's a bad term. It's the one I used to use, project engineers, who can actually specify what products do what, to actually get all the sensors and actuators to feed into controllers, which feed into the data integration layers and all that. Somebody's got to design all that stuff and pick the right vendors and the right products. So we've got to solve the problem at the field level. I agree with you. I think it's not recognized sufficiently, because all the juice, all the excitement is around what you can do at the higher levels.
But
I'm really glad you.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Scott just posted a really germane point to your point just now, Steve, in the chat, where he says that research in robotic surgery has found that, senior surgeons greatly benefit from the tech, but the low-level engineering folks don't get the experience of working with the surgeon anymore, right? And so to your point, Steve,
yeah,
if we bring in all this great AI to help the guy at the very top, but we don't have the people, so it just compounds the problem.
Yeah, but Anna, when we weren't allowed to actually use calculators in exams at one time, and we used to have log tables and stuff and slide rules. Things kind of just you assume it works, and then you build on that.
So there are two really important points that the panel is making, and one, Steve, is to your point that there has to be a mechanism to make sure that this field level personnel can recognize what the equipment is and what it's supposed to do, that they're using these software tools to control. But then to your point, Anno, about the importance of mentorship and the hands-on side, because our company, we have online training products and tools and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, that mentor relationship in the field is really where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And without it, there's no way to develop the mental maturity for a new person coming into the industry whose dad and mom or whatever weren't in this business, to predict what might happen next when they take an action. I mean, we've all had those oh crap moments. I mean, if somebody isn't on this call that, didn't go to bed one night because they pushed the wrong button without doing something, and so it's those kinds of mentor relationships that are critical to bringing in a new generation that's got the confidence to work with the tech, because like you said, Steve, they're definitely tech savvy, but they may not have the wisdom to understand how to apply it and what to do with it. So so I want to shift gears real
Melissa,
quick.
this is Mark. I want to ask
Hey, Mark.
I want to ask you this and the rest of the panel. So one of the things that I find extremely challenging for our industry is, finding all types of people for your entire pyramid. Okay, an example. Where personally, I've been going through a search now, and I finally are finding folks, and pleased to say we just hired 10 new people and another 5 are hopefully coming on board here soon. But my question now is this, is that here, well, globally, we as a world economy suffered through the pandemic and COVID and so forth and so on. Obviously, we're certain places still suffering. Fortunately, our industry has been pretty good in weathering the storm and whatnot. What about all these people who lost jobs and these jobs are never coming back? What about that? You know, this workforce, again, are they the young generation Z and Xers? Probably not. But they are mature people who have a strong work ethic, can be trained to do other things. What is our industry, or what do you suggest we collectively do to engage with these people and really tell them this industry we're all in is extremely exciting at all levels?
I'm so glad you made that point, Mark, because if I can come back and share a very practical thing that you in this industry can do in October, I would like to be able to do that. But to your point, we have just finished our first round at an effort to do exactly that with the Department of Labor, and we have received funding to create recruiting videos targeting displaced workers and to try and create a pathway for unqualified people to be retrained for key positions in our industry. We're very excited about it. It is a major milestone for our company, but I think it's also a really good opportunity for our industry to test out what I will share in October. To do that, here's the challenge. If you think about what the JACE did in our industry, okay, and you think about how it allowed disparate systems to be able to have some normalized, pane of glass. If you look at the types of people that we need to recruit from for our industry, we have to have a workforce development solution that acts as a JACE. And the reason for that is because they might have a little bit of mechanical, or they might have a little bit of electrical, or they might have some IT savvy and know nothing about the other. And we have to be able to modulate to those critical components that they need to be successful if we're talking about field level positions. And that's what this new project is designed to do. And we, the federal government has identified our program as one of the bright futures, where there's a lot of job growth. And so we've got an opportunity to do just that, Mark. And there are things that we need your help with, because to get that done well, we've got to engage people like yourself who are subject matter experts on specific topics and build some enthusiasm and paint a vision for opportunity that comes from more than one source. We're an industry of a lot of brilliant people, but we're successful because we collaborate, to Ken's point earlier, and we work together to solve problems, across a wide spectrum of things. So I would love to come back onto, in October and talk about very practical things we could do together. I have another question. All right. So if we look at this from the point of view of, okay, we agree we have a need. We agree that the biggest problem we have is in that field level tech. Our industry is only tapping into half of our population. We are not attracting women into these roles. And for me, I can tell you that I have never had to stand in line at any of our conferences at the ladies' bathroom. Okay. And that is an unusual situation. And I have been an uncommon person in the world that I've worked in for a very long time. And as I thought about, the work that I did back in the day when, we were doing controls and SCADA systems for wastewater plants. My daughters would be embarrassed if I came to pick them up from school in what they called man shoes, and, so there are just all kinds of dynamics that go into that. But if we think practically at a high level, how do we, as brothers and sisters in this industry, really change the game where it comes to recruitment? Because women are a large percentage of the real estate procurement authorities. They have a very large voice, as I did, in the procurement of systems for major organizations. And there is a strong female presence in a lot of the FM world. How do we as an industry meet that and at least move the needle a little bit more than we have? And I'd love to hear your ideas.
Just out of interest, Melissa, do we know, or do you track, and may not know immediately, the average number of, is this our industry specific problem, or is this an engineering problem, right? Because I know, females and engineers is hard to do in the first place. Are we below that average or above that average?
No, I can tell you that I am a numbers geek. So if we look at ASHRAE numbers and what is being attracted into the mechanical society, then those numbers are growing in the 20s. If we look at our numbers that I have worked with the Department of Labor to vet, we're in the below 10%. And we're probably in the 3% ratio. So much so that, we've got thousands of students, and when we find a girl, it's unusual, so it's challenging. And because of the programs that we have, we are really focused on, the government wants us to improve our diversity numbers, and our team, we just finished our 3rd month of trying to recruit for one major organization, and the numbers of female applicants were very, very, very low. So I would love your ideas and thoughts on, what your experiences have been at trying to do this.
So Scott just posted an interesting comment, really talking about women getting really interested in tech, especially if it's presented from the perspective of people's health and well-being. We haven't been doing that. Obviously, one of the things with COVID is actually that move, and maybe that could help if it's presented as more of a quality of life rather than just the technology component.
That's a great point, Scott.
Yeah.
We would love, to hear any and all ideas. This is a very serious opportunity for our industry, because if we could move the needle a little bit and tap into, what if we got to 10%? What if we got to 15%?
Yeah.
Where could we really move the needle? And, I think about some of the young women in our industry at AHR last year. I had a wonderful time at Teresa's presentation, and there were other young women who spent time on a bucket, but it's the bucket spending time area that is the greatest need. That is the layer that we have the greatest need to recruit women. And I'd love to hear other ideas if there are any in the chat. I see there's like 18 comments. I don't know if there are any others.
Melissa, is your firm involved, or is the Department of Labor looking at putting energies into the career development, but the career counseling at the high school level?
It's funny that you asked that. Yes, we have been tasked to do a a program of career advisement that gives what is considered pre-apprenticeships and internships and co-op opportunities to students. And we've titled that program Career Roadmap because we found that that appeals. We did some market A/B type testing with students and found that that appealed a little bit to them. And in that, that's one of the things that we would talk with you guys about when I come back in October, because we have funding from the federal government and state governments to create marketing videos targeting those students and displaced workers with the theme of those career roadmaps, you know, to talk about the great career, you know, like Steve, it was so cute at C4SB. I mean, how many former presidents of Tritium did we have, you know? and so, but to hear those inspiring stories of, I spent time, you know, with a little screwdriver and this is what I do today. So yes, we are doing that.
That could be part of the image issue. I mean, it's like your daughter's saying about the, you know, the workman's shoes things. I mean, that's already inbred in them about the thinking, but it's whether we try to differentiate between what we're actually trying to, our industry, anyway, the guys here are talking about how you control it and how you get the access to the information and stuff, as opposed to getting underneath a piece of HVAC equipment with a wrench. And, you know, there are two different things there. And I think we're all just branded with the same thing. And maybe it needs to, you know, be brought up a gear and saying, you know, the control technology is what makes it all work. You need to understand it, but it doesn't mean to say you're going to be, you know, laying on the floor getting oil in your hair and stuff, but it kind of still has that image, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is a very good point. We also had to be very careful that we don't misrepresent, because we have found, especially in my classroom experience, in the lab-based program, you know, it's one of the first automation and control systems programs in the state of Florida, and it is interesting looking at it with an industry, a lifetime of experience. You can tell the kids that test well may not necessarily be the ones that are going to do well on the job. You know, and there's a lot of different aspects. So there's got to be a balance between a little bit of a sexy marketing, you know, effort, a little bit of fitness, you know, whether or not this is a good fit, you know, of something you'd be interested in, and practical exposure through internships and co-ops so that they know really what the real work environment is going to be like, to your point, Roger.
So Terry Sharp on the audience has put up his hand, so I'm going to press this button to say allowed to talk. Terry, I hope that's okay. Maybe you can just verbalize what your question.
Yes, good day everybody, and thank you, and thank you for Roger for the invitation and for the welcome. I'm here today from the UK, a friend and colleagues of Roger's, and from the Building Controls Industry Association, a trade body within the UK controls manufacturers and specialist installers. I think the two questions that Melissa has posed could be supplementary and complementary. We have a perception, as Roger described, that we're about dirty water in pipework and heavy industry, when that's not really what we do any longer. We're about high tech, making buildings perform efficiently and maximizing the user experience of those buildings and occupant comfort. We have a ready-made pool of motivated and highly taught and educated engineers coming into the marketplace, and we're not describing ourselves adequately. My career's had me in some of the world's most prestige buildings, from palaces and stadiums and high-rise, but we don't talk about those solutions that we do. We talk about how we make valves and actuators dance. Whereas in reality, we're making buildings work, and that's exciting, but we don't talk about that. That's not how we market ourselves. And I think if we told the story about how we make these buildings work how we take this technology that the students have learned through schools and colleges and how it can be applied. I think what we do is very exciting, but we're too focused upon the nuts and bolts and linkages of making it that way. So that's my point. I think both these questions are supplementary and run in parallel. It's about attracting the talent that's plentiful and lots of energized, lots of enthusiastic young people. And so we can attract them, we need to retain them and develop a regime to replace that old apprenticeship system that those big four manufacturers used to follow. So we need to have a structured training program to retain, to develop, harness and energize those enthusiastic young people. This is an opportunity, not a threat.
Terry, I love your comments. In fact, when Anto does bring me back, I would love to encourage you to participate in some of the story building exercises that we want to create with people like yourself. And I can tell you that here in the US, your voice and your accent will be very well received. Students love hearing from the UK and your partners around the world. So we
Notice she's
would
talking
love
about
it.
you, Terry, not me.
Oh, you too, Roger. You too.
But I think that hopefully Terry's going to come on himself in October, because they have a brilliant training forum, which hopefully Terry will be talking about at some stage in October, which has just been created to actually highlight exactly what he said.
You know, it's interesting that this, what I've heard, several things, but one of the things that continually stands out to me is the fact that it's always been about the technology and things like that and the nuts and the bolts. It should now change our conversation to the outcomes. And again, it's this technology, it's the technicians, it's all the people together create the outcomes and define those. It could be sustainability, energy, whatever that is. And to Terry's point, you sound very regal, by the way. You should be on the crown, Terry.
All right, that's what was in my mind.
But you're absolutely right. That to me is, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation.
So we're coming to the top of the hour, and I just want to ask Melissa just one other sort of point, and it's really the relationship between this work that you're doing and the coalition. And if you can just sort of comment on that, and then we can bring this to a wonderful close.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as far as the workforce development challenges and opportunities, as Terry says, I love the way you frame that as it's really the opportunity. What we're doing with the coalition is trying to bring synergy around some standards and elements that should be present for us to conquer these opportunities together. And in doing that, we will have some guidelines and some resources and things that companies can tap into to be able to address the the needs that they have. Every company is going to be a little bit different, but on a bigger scale, the goal is to also help align the projects that we already have in place happening with the Department of Labor and the Department of Education, with some of the exciting work the coalition is doing with the Department of Energy and the Building Technology Office. And that's the part that I'm most excited about, because it will give us the opportunity to address these issues through the procurement cycle, which is where a lot of the need really needs to be met, so that people have the tools that they need to procure the services for workforce that they need to have access to. So I don't know, does that answer?
Yeah, it does. It connects the dots, and obviously we'll continue that the conversation about the coalition and other things next week when we come back. But we need to bring this to a close because we're past the bewitching hour. Thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us today and talking about this. And thank you, Terry, for adding a little bit of class to the conversation today. And with that, we'll put a video on this of the show up on YouTube by tomorrow morning. And with that, wishing you all great rest of the week. Bye-bye all. Bye.
See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.